Welcome into the episode of Patrick Jones Baseball. On this week's episode, we have Dr. Daniel Laby. So, Dr. Laby is a sports and performance vision specialist. He's been working with several professional sports and organizations and players for decades, and he consults for several Major League Baseball organizations and has some great stories in this episode too. And he's someone who I have a ton of questions for him, and he answers all of them, and it's a lot of it's backed by research, or he'll clarify if it's something that's anecdotal too. So. I enjoyed this one. I appreciate Dr. Laby for coming on. Go grab his book. He's got a new book out. It's called Eye of the Champion, and we'll put that link in the show notes. And so that's something that I recommend. It's a great book, and I've been happy to get my own hands on it. I've learned a lot from that. I also want to note for those of you who are in season or going to be in season two is I do have a mental game training program. So if you're interested in working with me one-on-one during the season on the mental side of the game, whether it be approach, confidence, routine, all these things, game planning, send me an email, jonesbaseballtraining@gmail.com, and we'll see if we're good fit to work together. So jonesbaseballtraining@gmail.com if you want to work with me on the mental game this season. All right, here we go with Dr. Daniel Laby. All right, we know. Welcome on, Dr. Laby, to the podcast. Thanks for so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Patrick. Looking forward to it.
So, a few weeks ago, I did a podcast on vision with Ryan Harrison. I'm sure you're familiar with his dad, Dr. Bill Harrison, who's was around for a really long time. Take me through on how you got started into getting into sports vision and working with different teams and players. Like, how did that all come about for you?
Absolutely. Well, totally by accident, which is kind of interesting. When I was doing my fellowship at UCLA in pediatric ophthalmology and actually binocular vision using both eyes together, they had a project that they wanted to finish that the previous fellow had started, and everyone had to do a project to graduate that program. I didn't want to do someone else's project. That sounded not much fun. But it was kind of interesting a little bit, and that project had to do with testing the vision of the LA Dodgers, which they had done a few months before, but didn't finish analyzing the data and had written the paper. And I negotiated, if you will, with the director of the program and said, I'll take up the data, I'll do the project, but I want to be the first author. I want to be able to organize everything and kind of run it myself. He agreed, and it ended up being the first paper on sports vision in a standard ophthalmology journal in the medical literature. We published that in 1996. And that work with the Dodgers continued for about 16 or 18 years. Each year, spring training, coming back to work with them and correct the vision and work with the different players and coaches and so forth. And once it got a few years, other teams heard about it and asked how they can get involved, and it kind of blossomed from there to 8 World Series championships, lots of league championships, working with lots of teams, working with lots of players, and hopefully making a difference for these guys.
So how does it work? I mean, I think most people that they know when it comes to vision and testing your vision, they're familiar with going to the eye doctor and having the Snell chart, that type of a thing. But so how does it work when you're going to different spring trainings or just working with different players? Like, is there an assessment that's maybe more applicable to baseball players or hitters?
Absolutely. Well, what we've designed over the years is something called the sports vision pyramid. And if you think about a pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid is pretty broad to support the pyramid, and it kind of goes up in stage, getting narrower as you get to the top. And if you have a pyramid built like that, you have a very stable pyramid, just like the ones in Egypt or in South America that have lasted for thousands of years. What each of those levels of pyramid is different parts of the visual system that have to do with performance in sports. And so, for example, one of the top things is like hand-eye coordination, how fast you can react to something. Well, if you train that and make that really good, you have a very wide part on top. But if you don't work on the base, you have a narrow base, and you have a pyramid that's going to fall over and it's not be very stable or useful. So you want to start from the bottom, working your way up, and you start the bottom in what just basic vision, what each eye can do by itself in terms of vision. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Then you look at how both eyes work together. That gives you 3D depth perception. Then you look at how the brain uses that visual information to make a decision about what to do, a go, no-go type decision. And then you look at how the brain uses the vision to guide a motor action to actually intercept the ball with your feet, with your hands, shoot a basket, whatever the sport is. And if all that's optimized properly, then the top of the pyramid is, on field or on court performance that's optimal. And so what you have to do, and what a lot of, I think, sports vision specialists miss, is the idea of working from the bottom up to make sure you have a wide base that can support excellent performance higher up on the pyramid to get to excellent performance on the top of the pyramid. And so we look at one-eyed vision tests. We don't use the Snellen chart. The Snellen chart is a very poor test of vision, does not correlate to actual performance on the field. Our first paper in 1996 talked about what the average vision on the Snellen chart is for athletes, and the answer is 20/12. Where 20/20 is normal vision, 20/15 is a little bit better. 20/12 means you can see as an athlete from 20 feet what the average person sees from 12 feet. You can be 8 feet further away and still see it. And that's the average. And there's some people that get to the human limited vision, which is about 20/8, meaning that they can be 12 feet further than average person to still see it. But it doesn't correlate to on field performance or batting performance. So we developed a system to test a much more realistic measure of vision, which has to do with the size of a target, the contrast of the target, and how long you can view the target. And that does correlate. We published those papers about how that relates to what's called plate discipline metrics in baseball, and that does correlate. And so you have to use the right test to measure vision, and you have to start at the right place in the pyramid as you work up to make sure everything's optimized to get the full benefit of all the training and all the intervention you're doing.
Yeah, that was really good info. I like the pyramid concept of starting at the bottom and working your way all the way to the top. So I guess, do you see some of the mistakes are just doing, maybe like the Brock string drill or just doing random drills and not really knowing what they need to specifically work on? Like, first of all, maybe the question should be like, is doing those types of exercises beneficial regardless, or could it not be that beneficial at all if you don't really know the underlying issue?
Well, let's think about medicine in general. If you go to a doctor and are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Let's say you go to a doctor and the doctor gives you an antibiotic or gives you Tylenol, right? If you have a fever, Tylenol works really well to lower your fever, or aspirin works really well to lower your fever. If you don't have a fever, it's not going to do very much for you. Also, you don't want to go to the doctor that gives everybody the same treatment. In other words, if you come in with one problem, another person comes with another problem, you better get different treatments because you have different problems. If you go to a sports vision specialist who says everyone needs to do a Brock string because it's going to help you perform better, to me, that's a big red flag. You want to have the person evaluate what you can do, find out what areas of weakness you have, and design a treatment plan to improve those areas that are a problem for you. And other people have other areas of problems, and the treatment will be different. And unfortunately, in sports vision, lots of people have a cookbook. Everyone has to do this, everyone has to do that, regardless of individualizing the care. And, we used to treat people like that in about 1500 or 1600. Everyone got leeches to suck out blood. And nowadays we have a much better system where we can evaluate with lab tests, x-rays, MRIs, CTs, whatever it may be, to identify the problem, design the treatment for that problem that's been shown to work. It's called evidence-based medicine. That's been shown to work to make a difference, and not to do things that we think just might make a difference, but there's no evidence for it.
Mm. Is there any way or any tips for maybe people out there listening who maybe they can't necessarily, they don't have access to get an in-depth exam like you just talked about right there, but they still want to improve their vision?
Yep. And that's a great lead into the reason why I wrote the book. Because what I found was exactly that. I'm headquartered in New York City. I travel to major league teams. They pay me to travel, and that's fine. But the general single athlete, can't bring me out to their hometown with all my equipment to do a test. It's not feasible. So the most important thing is knowledge, is to understand what sports vision is, how we can use sports vision to evaluate, to train, to treat, to correct, to improve our performance. Understand that. And then, you go to your local eye doctor, and if they tell you, well, you're 20/20, you're great, you don't need glasses, but you've read the book. Now you know that 20/20 isn't good enough to hit a baseball. You need 20/15 or better. And if you're educated, you'll tell the doctor, well, that's great, I'm happy I'm 20/20, but I need to play I want to play baseball. I want to do well. I want to get a scholarship. I want to move on, maybe a professional career. I need vision better than that, doc. I need like 20/15 or better. Can you give me glasses to get me that? And if you have that knowledge and you ask that, you have a chance for success. If you go in there and not know anything, the doctor says you're 20/20, you're normal, your eyes are fine, goodbye, you leave, and now you're leaving not knowing with a deficit that's going to impact your performance. So knowledge is the best thing, and the book is one way to get it. I'm actually today working on a course, an online course, the fundamentals of fundamentals of sports vision that people can get that way. And I think that is another way to educate yourself. YouTube, I had 13,000 people on my YouTube channel that watch my YouTubes every week to educate themselves about, and it's free, totally free, educate themselves about sports vision, all different topics. They're short videos. It's not, you learn everything in one video, and it's a little bit of a hassle to click through all the videos, but the different ways to gain knowledge. And if you gain knowledge, then you're armed with what you need to speak to your local doctor without having to go, come to New York. You're welcome to, but you don't have to travel to New York to have this done with me. But you'll have enough knowledge to get the benefit of what we've learned over the last several decades in sports vision.
What's a nugget, like what's one nugget from the book that you think people would enjoy to hear?
Well, the book has anecdotes about my, different case studies and anecdotes about my experience.
I like anecdotes.
There's a whole bunch of different ones in there. Some of them are sort of embarrassing, like the time I ran over Tommy the Sword's foot. You can read about that there. Other ones are more, more heartwarming, if you will. Someone who has a severe vision problem that was having trouble when crossing streets in New York City because she didn't see cars making turns and was getting injured because she doesn't have peripheral vision. How we could use sports vision not to help her necessarily perform as an athlete, but to help her avoid getting hit by cars. There's a story in there about my work with Manny Ramirez from the Boston Red Sox in 2004, where he was having problems, and that season was pivotal for the team. They won the World Series for the first time in many decades, and he became the MVP based on a training, somewhat based on a training regimen. And we talk about that as one of the anecdotes. So there's a lot of kind of fun anecdotes to kind of hear about, little backstories of some of these guys that players might recognize their names from the past. Some in terms of science data, I think this what we mentioned, the idea that 20/20 isn't good enough. That if you think about vision and what you see, that 20/20 number doesn't cut it in most sports. Even in certain sports like soccer or football in the UK, for example, 20/20 is not the answer either. You need 20/15 or better. That's what studies have shown. And there's a great video on online that you can watch from Red Bull. It's called Trent's Vision. It's about Trent Alexander-Arnold, who's the right midfielder for the Liverpool club, who's an exceptional player that we spent time testing, training, and testing again. And Red Bull made a 47-minute documentary about that process, which goes through everything about sports vision. So it gets into the knowledge part, where if you watch that, you'll learn a lot about sports vision. It's very entertaining because you see Trent struggling through a lot of the work we did with him, but then you see a success at the end, and he ended up getting selected finally for the World Cup team from England. He got injured, but he didn't play, but he was selected to play for the club, where he was initially actually not on the team. And so I think some of what we did helped him somewhat, and you'll see some of that in his performance as well. So there's lots of resources online. There's lots of nuggets. There's lots of pieces of knowledge, and you don't have to know everything in one day. You can learn pieces over time, and every piece will help.
Yeah, I actually, I assume it's probably the same videos, but I do like following you on LinkedIn because it is those really short videos, and it's like one really good tip. Like you said, I kind of like it because it's shorter, so it's not doesn't take up 10, 15 minutes of your time. It's just a couple minutes, if that, and so some really good content put out there. I did watch that Red Bull documentary too with you. That was really cool. It was really well done as well. I mean, obviously Red Bull, they of course did, went very professional with the whole thing, but that was really neat to watch. Is there anything that's maybe it is backed by science, maybe it's not backed by science, and maybe it's an anecdote, but is there anything that you have seen from all the players you've tested over the years, and this is what you believe? And I'll give you an example. So like from a hitting coach standpoint, it says, hey, you should pull the ball in the air, right? Hitters should pull the ball in the air to be more productive. Well, that's definitely true, but like I guess maybe an anecdote is like they shouldn't actually try to pull the ball in the air in order for it to go in the air and pull side, right? They should try to go opposite field. Is there any anecdotes that you have when it comes to vision or vision training?
Yeah, the whole process of hitting is a matter of prediction. you need to, it takes a quarter of a second basically for the ball to get, depending on how fast it's pitched, a 90-mile-an-hour fastball to get to home plate's about 400 milliseconds. It takes about, which is 4/10 of a second. It takes about 150 milliseconds to swing at a bat. So you have about a quarter of a second, 250 milliseconds to actually see the pitch, decide if you're going to swing or not, and initiate the motor action to swing. When you think about moving your hand, it happens pretty quick in real time, but it's measurable. There's a certain amount of delay from when your brain decides to move your hand and your hand starts moving. And when you're talking about a pitch that's fast and it only takes 400, less than half a second to get to home plate, you have to start your swing in a quarter second. And if you think about it, a blink is a third of a second. So we're talking about faster than a blink. You have to decide to start your swing. That becomes very important to do things quickly, and it becomes very important to be able to predict where the ball is going to be based on what you're seeing in that quarter second time. And if I was a batter, and I've tried batting, and there's I think some of that in the book as well, it didn't go too well. My batting experience, both in terms of success, which was very poor, and as well as in terms of how I felt afterwards. My hands were swollen, my hips hurt. It was interesting, but it wasn't fun to do. So I can appreciate, that it's not easy. And if you're obviously doing it for a profession, it's much harder. But the point is, if you can master that prediction, then you have the best chance to affect where the ball is going to go, whether you're trying to pull it, whether you're trying to hit the opposite field, whatever you want to do, you'll be able to do because you have plenty of time to do it because you've been able to predict on the path of the ball early on in its release. The concept of following the ball to hit the bat is total fallacy. We can't follow the ball fast enough. Our eyes can't move fast enough to follow the ball, number one. Number two, following the ball and assuming that following is intended to help you change your swing or hit the ball better. Remember, it takes time to see something, decide something, start a motor action. By the time that happens, the ball is in the catcher's glove. And so it's purely a matter of predicting. And you've seen batters, swing at balls. They'd say, how can you swing at that? It's ridiculous. Well, his prediction was wrong, right? He saw the early trajectory and he thought it was going to be in one place and it was somewhere else. And that's fine. That's part of the problem. Remember in baseball that if you are wrong 70% of the time, you make millions and millions and millions of dollars. If I were in medical school and I got 70% of my medical questions wrong, I wouldn't be a physician.
Yeah, you wouldn't be on this podcast right now.
Exactly. And so that, batting is a known difficult task. But if you master these little incremental changes that have to do with sports vision, you can certainly improve the outcomes.
I gotcha. I like that. What are some of the things that you've seen from players when it comes to like LASIK surgery? Like, is that something that players should look into more or less? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I published some papers about that as well. One of the papers we published, and we early on, baseball players are bright. They read, they talk, they understand what's happening and what's available. And early on, when the refractive surgery started out, PRK and then LASIK and different types of laser procedures. People want to do it, and some did. And some had good experiences and some did. And you didn't hear too much about the bad experiences, but they had bad experiences. And so we wanted to see if it was worth them to do. And we looked at performance on field because most of the time, the reason they were doing it is because they had the contact lenses bothered them and interfere with their batting and it was dry. And that's the reason they weren't hitting well and all these different reasons. So we didn't care so much about what their vision was. We wanted to see their on-field performance, batting performance before the procedure and the batting performance after the procedure. So we looked to see as many guys as we could who would, had a date of when they had the procedure off season, 2023 versus 2024 off season. So we knew, okay, before 2023 season, we can look at those numbers and we look at the after that and compare them. We found no statistical difference between performance before or after the procedure. In other words, doing the procedure didn't get rid of all those problems they said that they were having in terms of batting. Now, obviously, there was one play, there were players that did better and there were players that did worse. But that's the point of doing a study where you get a number of people, you put them all together and you look to see, is there a difference statistically, mathematically between the intervention, which would be the laser. And so there was no improvement according to that on-field performance. The thing is that the laser has risks. And so if you have no benefit, but you have some risk, now the balance between risk benefit is not in your favor anymore. If there's a big benefit and small risk, definitely do it. If there's a big risk and a small benefit, definitely don't do it. Nothing is that black and white. But in general, no performance improvement and risks of simple things like not seeing perfectly and you need to have another procedure done. If you look at what's his name, the catcher for the Braves several years ago, his name's escaping me, who had the procedure, didn't do well, went to minor leagues, was on rehab for a while, had another procedure, many procedures, affected his career. Even the famous Tiger Woods, who often promotes these laser centers, has had several procedures because he needed retouches, redos to get it right. Well, every time you do a procedure, you run a risk of more risk. I mean, you run a chance of more risk. Number two is glare. After the procedure, you can have a lot of glare sensitivity to bright light. Well, if you're playing baseball, a lot of your games are at night. You have lights on. If you get a ball up in the lights, you're going to miss it. You're not going to see it because there's too much glare. And the biggest issue that most people have when they have the procedure is dry eye. They're dry, and especially if you're, in Arizona, for example, it's even worse, or on high altitudes, and Denver, it's worse. A dry eye is not too uncommon in these refractive procedures. And you need to either use eye drops, or sometimes you need a procedure to help you with the dryness. Sometimes it doesn't even get better. And so there's definite risks. The biggest risk, in fact, if you look at big studies of thousands of people, looking at many different authors with their experience together, you find out that the vision gets to about 2017 to 2019 on average. Well, that's great, because if you're a general person like you or I, and you want to get to 2020 or a little bit better, there's a good chance you're going to get there. But I told you the average vision was 2012 for baseball. We need 2015 or better. If the result on average is 2017 to 19, you're less than that. And so where you had 2015 or 2012 vision with your contact lenses, now without the contacts, you're less than that. And so not only have you had risk, but now you have decreased vision as well. And for all those reasons, we don't usually suggest any of the professional athletes I work with to do in baseball to do laser surgery. I have had one or two people that have real problems with the contacts and are just, tried lots of contacts. We try everything we can to get them to be okay with contacts. In glass, it doesn't work, and we do send them to have it done. But I have a couple people in the country that are really, really good LASIK surgeons, and I send them there to do the procedure, and knock on wood, they've all come out okay. And so the importance of who does your procedure is critical as well.
So I definitely won't be getting LASIK surgery if I want to play professional baseball or want to get better as a baseball player. That's good to know, because I've actually had a few hitters reach out and ask about that. And quite honestly, I didn't know. So you're the perfect person to ask when it comes to that. Um, let's say I have a 20/20 vision, and I want to be 20/15 or better. Is the first thing you're going to recommend, obviously after you do your evaluation on me, is it probably going to be going to contacts and trying that first, or are we going to try different drills and things like that first?
Yeah, so there's several different things to consider. Not everybody can be made to be 20/8 perfect vision for human beings. There's two pieces to the system. And if you think about a camera, at least an old-fashioned camera, not digital camera, but old-fashioned film camera, you remember when you get your picture, that's going to be dependent on both the film and the lens, right? And how well you focused, and how the film is developed, and so forth. So there's multiple pieces that get to a perfect picture. If you want to get to a perfect vision picture, we have to think about similar things. We have to think about the focus of the eye. That's going to be critical. And that's where glasses or contacts come in. We have to think about how the retina works and how the brain works, even if the picture is focused perfectly, to see whether or not you're going to have a good image. And depending on where the issue is, it might be glasses or contacts if it's a focus problem, or it might be some training. There's some brain training type ways we can improve the brain's use of vision that's coming from the eyes to get the vision a little better as well. So it really depends. Like I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all scenario here. It's an individual measurement, evaluation, a lot of work to make sure we get every fine nuance of the focus proper, and then we see what vision we get.
So obviously everybody out there needs to for sure go and buy the book. And one of the I really liked how you talked about the most important thing is educating people, and when they get their eyes checked and doctor says, hey, it's 20/20, but hey, your baseball player needs to be, your softball player needs to be 2015 or better. What should be their next steps? Obviously, they don't have you, right? They know they need to get to 2015. You see different things. I know we mentioned earlier about some different drills, and I know you have the Manny Ramirez drill that you created on your own. Should they be looking for certain specific drills to do?
Well, the Manny Ramirez is a hand-eye coordination drill, so that's higher on the pyramid
Yeah.
than just vision. So that wouldn't be the first thing to do. The hope would be that when the player tells the eye doctor, "I need 2015. I'm happy on 2020. I need 2015. Can you get me there?" The doctor will probably make a face because now they have to spend another 5 or 10 minutes with you to try to do that as opposed to seeing the next patient. But what that means is what we call a very careful refraction. Refraction is the process of figuring out what lens may benefit you to see better. That's that big machine that goes in front of your face with all the different knobs and dials, and you have to look and say which is better, number one, number two. And that's looking for very small differences in nearsightedness, farsightedness, astigmatism to make the right combination to try to get that 2015 vision. It takes extra time because you have to be really delicate in each of those changes that you make in the lens to try to get that little bit better vision from 2020 to 2015. Our experience has been that with athletes, they're much more sensitive to small blurring errors. And so if you give the right lens, you can see that improvement. In the average person, if you show them a very small power lens, they'll think it doesn't do anything for them. You show it to an athlete, they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, this is so much clearer," and they'll be able to read much better the letters on the chart. And so that's the first step. If someone is told you're 2020, you're great, let the doctor know you want 2015 and ask them if there's a very small, weak lens that they wouldn't give to anybody normally that they can give me to get 2015. I want that because I need that level of vision to have the best chance to perform in my sport.
Great advice. Love that. What about hitters who, they're stepping up to the plate or maybe on the on deck circle, and yeah, obviously it's more of maybe like a band-aid than anything else, but it helps them in the moment, even if it is anecdotal. Like, is there anything that you've heard over the years, or recommended to hitters to help them see better, like when they step in the box?
Yeah, well, the on deck circle is a critically important point in the process. Even before you get to the on deck circle, you better know the pitcher. You better know what pitches he likes in certain counts, because, as I said, this is a matter of prediction. And so if you're able to get your visual information and have an idea how the spin of the ball or the fingers on the release of the ball or the arm slot as the ball is being released, what pitch that suggests, and if you know this, if your brain says from your vision, this guy pitches, a two-seamer, but his two-seamer, he doesn't really pitch that very often in this count or in this, at all, then you should say to yourself, well, that's probably not what it's not a two-seamer because he doesn't do that, or he has no slider, whatever it is. If you have that knowledge going in, then you have a better chance to use the vision appropriately to decide between maybe hopefully one or two pitches, maybe one to two or two to three pitches, to make your decision when you're actually at the plate. So if you're in the on deck circle, you should have the knowledge ahead of time. You should be watching what's happening with your teammate who's on the box to see what the count is, what the pitches he's getting, and start to recognize the movement of the pitcher and so forth. That's why pitchers tend to have better experience in the beginning of the season. They have less good performance towards the end of the season because the batters are familiar with them already, right? You want to get a step up on that by being in the on deck circle and start to get that experience. And you should have the knowledge ahead of time in your head about what they can do. There's a lot of studying you have to do when you're a batter. It's not just a matter of walking out there and swinging. And when you get into the box, now you see how the count is going. And based on the count, you should be able to predict which one or two pitches this guy's going to throw, because most people only do one or two pitches, and most pitchers don't have more than two or three pitches anyway. And in certain counts, you're going to have a pretty good idea what's going to come, and that's just a matter of figuring out where it's going from its initial movement. And so each of those steps becomes critical. So you really need to concentrate. Your eyes need to be optimal, right? Optimized. And you should have prior knowledge that you can bring in so that you can, when you make this decision, which is a instantaneous subconscious decision. This is not a batting or swinging at a pitch, is not a conscious act, it's subconscious. But the more data you have in your subconscious ready to go, becomes more efficient and more accurate.
I heard somewhere that there's some people whose eyes work better more like when they're going left to right versus others like top down when it comes to being able to hone in on a specific point. And what I'm just thinking of is like the pitcher's release point, right? Is there a way to know like where you should start out looking before you beat the pitcher to release point, or is that just going to be trial and error?
Yeah, so that brings in what we call the quiet eye. The quiet eye is really important. We've published some papers on it in different sports. It becomes something that really will determine whether you're gonna be successful or not. And if you think about it in broad sense, when you move your eyes from left to right very quickly, you don't see a blur as you move your eye. You see where you started and you see where you're trying to go, and it goes boom, boom. And the part in between is blacked out, is your brain suppresses it. That's the medical term we use. It suppresses your vision so it doesn't interfere with what you're trying to do. Because you can imagine if you look around and everything is swishing all the time, it would be hard to know what's going on. So that's something that the brain subconsciously does. So if you're kind of the last moment moving out to release point from looking, maybe what you should have been looking at is where the hand is in the glove and how the hand is holding the ball in the glove. And then when the hand goes behind the back of the pitcher and you can't see his hand anymore, that's where you should move your hand out, your eye out to the release point, and keep your eye there, not moving. That's the quiet part, not moving. And so you have maximal visual information. If you do that too late, then you're going to suppress some of the vision. You want to get out there ahead of time. And that's part of the on deck circle, right? When you're in the on deck circle, you should be seeing where his release is. Where's the release point on this pitcher? So that you can, from the get go, from pitch number one, know where to move your eyes to and have the best chance to identify the pitch. And so that quiet eye concept in golf and basketball, in ice hockey, in soccer, and certainly in baseball, we've shown it, we've measured it, we use it to evaluate players, is critical.
Is there any research coming out or anything that you maybe predict will happen when it comes to vision in the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years or so? Like, are we going to be able to, for example, is LASIK surgery going to work on everybody and everyone's going to be able to get 20/20 vision? Like, is there anything out there with how fast technology is improving that you've heard or you've seen or just optimistic for?
When you say 20/20 vision, remember that's not good enough.
All right, 2012. 2012 is what I said, 2012.
Um, 5 years, you gave us 5 year window. That's a long time in technology / medicine and so forth. So I think there are things before that. The question, every year at spring training, for example, when I go down this Friday down to Florida to begin the 6 weeks in spring training, we bring new technology down. And one of the instruments we're bringing down is a new system that was FDA approved last year. That's going to help us with that, how the eye is performing. For vision, we'll say. And so we brought down every year pretty much things. Sometimes we test it doesn't really make sense, doesn't work. We don't do it anymore. Other times we do it and we see, oh, this correlates to performance. We want to use that. And so there's, those are things that the clubs that I work with, frankly, the clubs that are more successful. At one point, I did a study on this. The clubs that have employed this vision type of level at a high level, they're the ones who are in the playoffs, in the league championships and the World Series. At least over half, if not 2/3 of the clubs this year in 2023 employ a high level vision system. Sometimes with me, sometimes with other people, but they all do that. So the clubs that are not thinking in this space are frankly a handicap. They're not going to be in the postseason. They're not going to win the big money, if you will. And so there's technology that we're using now that is available, just have to know how to use it. And I think that's the key. There's lots of systems out there that people use and aren't using them appropriately, fully, or optimally. And I think that's an important piece as well. We're seeing VR systems coming into play. There's several different VR companies that are working in the sports, vision area, if you will, or sports performance area. Some of them are more based on science, some less based on science. Some of them are second round drafts of something didn't work the first time, so they figured if we move to VR, maybe it will work. It doesn't work that way. The VR resolution isn't good enough to see spin of a ball. The systems just aren't fast enough, and the resolution of the images isn't good enough to see the spin, to see the seams, to see the fingers. And so if you're trying to have someone replicate a pitch, it's just not, you don't see it. and so that's worthless. But other systems are designed to kind of work at the visual abilities that allow you to perform, and those types of systems I think are going to be much more beneficial because they allow improvement in the skills that the player then can use to perform better, as opposed to trying to improve their performance directly. And
What are some of the systems that you think are better?
well, the one system comes to mind is called reflection, um, reflexion, or reflection go, I think they call it. It runs on an Oculus, the Meta Oculus headset, so it's a fairly low cost entry point. You don't have to buy you don't have to buy an Apple headset to do it. You can buy the Meta headsets about $300 roughly. It can even be the Oculus 2. It doesn't have to be the newest Oculus 3. You download, it's like a computer, so you download apps, you can watch movies on it, you can, it's a headset, you can do anything you want on it. But one of those is a Reflection Go app, which you can download, and it's not too expensive to use, and it looks at those basic components of vision: hand-eye coordination, reaction time, go no go decision, follow the ability to follow a moving target, things like that. Some sports need more of one, some sports need more of the other, but it's a system that has resolute that has the ability to teach and train, and it will go through a training process, your ability to do well with these tasks, which are tasks that are important, that have been shown to be important to performance.
What about the Synaptic glasses?
Yep. Synaptic is good as well. It really depends on how you're using them, right? They have a couple different versions of them. And you had to think of two different things with these shutter glasses. One of them is the glasses that block and turn on kind of periodically. There are other glasses that are from Holland or Netherlands, Q-Shot, I think they're called, that are more interesting actually to me, because those are glasses that are on and there's a trigger that blocks your vision. And so if you think about it, if you're throwing a ball, just a soft toss ball to somebody, right? It's one thing to have part of that entire trajectory kind of come and go with the Synaptic glasses. It's something else to be able to see the first part of that movement and then have the glasses block your vision and still try to catch the ball. And if you think about batting, as we talked about, that's more akin to batting, because in batting you have to see a little bit, then predict, and after that, what your vision does is irrelevant because you can't decide and make your muscles move fast enough. And so the idea being, if you just do a soft toss to someone and force them to learn how to predict trajectory of a moving ball, but maybe block it at the very end, they'll catch it probably pretty easily. But obviously, block it in the beginning, they don't have much to see. It's harder to know where it is, and it's harder to do. And with these glasses, you can actually backtrack that blocking closer and closer to the release of the ball, making it harder and harder as they train to get better. They even have a system where you can have a pitcher throw a pitch, and as the hand breaks this infrared beam, the glasses turn off a certain amount of time later. So if you want to really train a batter to really concentrate on the first part of the pitch, you use something like that, where you start giving them a fair amount of vision, and as they're successful, you take away some, and you get them to be successful. You take away more, get them to be more successful, and that's the way you back it up, so that they have to really depend on just a little bit of vision to predict where the ball's going to go and have a reasonable chance of hitting it.
Q-Shot, that's what it's called.
Q-Shot, yeah. Q-Shot, the letter Q, S-H-O-T, I believe is the name of the glasses.
Love it. Tell you what, this has been a ton of fun. I appreciate you coming on. You're obviously, more about vision than I do, probably my left pinky alone. But where can people go to get the book? I'm excited to read it, get it in my own hands personally. What's the best way for people to go and get it?
Yeah, today already it's the Kindle version is available for pre-order. It's at in the beginning now, since it's just in the pre-order, it's at a significantly discounted price of 99 cents. I spend hours and hours working on it, but they tell me that's the best way to get people aware of it. So for the next till March 10th, I think it's 99 cents. The hardcover and softcover should be in a day or two available as well as on Amazon. I'm waiting for Amazon to review it. We sent it in last week, and I'm waiting for the review. Once they reviewed it, they open it up for sales. The softcover, and I got a pre-release copy, but the softcover and the hardcover should be in the next day or two.
Eye of the Champion, that's the name of it.
Eye of the Champion. Here you go.
Okay. Love it.
Now you can go to my website, sportsvision.nyc.
Okay.
And there's a page for the book there that I have. Right now, I have a piece as of now because it's not out fully yet on the hardcover and softcover. You can put in your name and address, email address, and then when it comes out, I'll be sending out an email to everybody who did that to know that it's available. There's other things in there. If people want a consultation, a video consultation with me, they can do that. And as I say, I'm putting together a course. It's not quite ready yet to get this information out to as many people as we can across the planet, basically, because I'm maxed out. I really can't do a whole lot more in terms of work with this, but this knowledge shouldn't just stay with me or with these clubs. It should be available to everybody who wants to perform at their best.
Awesome, Doctor. I appreciate you coming on. We're gonna put all those links in the book link and everything in the show notes for people to go and grab. But appreciate you for coming on today.
Great, my pleasure. And anyway, there's a place for questions. If someone has questions, they can send something over. I try to get them as taken care of as soon as I can. But if someone has a burning question, I'm happy to try to help them, guide them, point them in the right direction.
Sounds good.